The code CEO used me to hurt her ex, then started wanting me instead. The elevator doors slid open with a sound like a breath held too long. I stepped into Celeste Rourke's top-floor office, expecting a late-night portrait session. Softbox lights, a campaign wall, a CEO who wanted to look powerful for a boardroom spread she'd framed behind her desk. Instead, she was standing at the glass window with her back to me. The city sprawled below her like something she owned and had grown bored of. A single champagne flute sat on the edge of her desk, untouched. The bubbles had died 20 minutes ago. Miss Voss. She didn't turn around. Her voice was low and measured, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to cut. I was beginning to think you'd decline the commission. Your offer was generous. I set my equipment case down, letting the professional rhythm steady me. And your reputation precedes you. At that, she turned. Celeste Rourke was 42 and wore it like a weapon. Silvery blonde pulled back tight enough to pull at the architecture of her cheekbones. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. Eyes the color of a winter sea. Gray, cold, and deep enough to drown in if you weren't careful. I'd photographed powerful women before. I'd never met one who felt dangerous before she'd said a word. My reputation, she repeated, walking toward me with the slow precision of someone who never hurried because she'd never had to. And what have you heard? That you built Rourke Industries from a 12-person startup to a multinational in 14 years. That your board is terrified of you. That you don't smile in photographs. A flicker at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile. Something sharper. What else? The question landed oddly, too weighted for small talk. I adjusted my camera strap against my shoulder, buying myself a second. That you value privacy, I said. Which is why I'm here at 11 o'clock at night instead of during business hours. Privacy. She stopped 6 feet from me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something cold and green, like winter foliage crushed underfoot. Yes, I'm very protective of what's mine. The way she said mine made the air in the room feel thinner. Shall we begin? I gestured toward the campaign wall she'd had constructed, a seamless backdrop in pearl gray, flanked by controlled lighting that I suspected had been arranged by someone other than me. The setup looks professional. Did your previous photographer leave it? I had my team prepare it to your specifications, the ones you sent in your portfolio proposal. I paused. I didn't send specifications. Celeste picked up the champagne flute, didn't drink from it, just held it by the stem, rotating it slowly so the dead bubbles caught the city light. No, she said. You didn't. The silence that followed had weight. The kind of silence that happens when one person knows something the other person is just beginning to suspect. My hand was still on the camera strap. I didn't move it. Miss Rourke, I get the sense this isn't about executive portraits. Oh, it is. She set the glass down with a click that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows. Just not exclusively. You see, I've been curious about you for some time, Miss Voss. About your work, your eye, your clients. The pause before clients was deliberate, surgical. I photograph a lot of people, I said carefully. You do. Executives, artists, politicians, old money. She walked past me now, toward a private door at the far end of the office, and I caught the faint sound of a key being turned in a lock I hadn't noticed before. And, recently, a woman named Vittoria Ashford. My spine went cold and hot at the same time. Vittoria, 63 years old, silver-haired, impossibly elegant, and the kind of woman who left fingerprints on your life that never quite faded. She'd hired me 4 months ago for a private portrait series at her estate in the south of France. What happened during that week was professional. Until it wasn't. Until late nights in her library turned into conversations that turned into something I still hadn't found language for. Celeste knew. I watched her emerge from the private room holding a leather portfolio case, old and worn at the edges, the kind of object that had been handled many times by the same hands. Vittoria and I were together for 6 years, Celeste said, laying the portfolio on her glass desk. Did she mention that? No, she wouldn't have. I'm not a chapter Vittoria revisits. She opened the portfolio. Photographs, not digital prints, actual film photographs, slightly yellowed at the borders, the kind that existed before everything could be filtered and forgotten. Celeste and Vittoria together, younger, laughing in a garden I recognized as Vittoria's property in Provence. Celeste looking at Vittoria the way someone looks at the sun, knowing it could burn them, not caring. My chest tightened. She left me, Celeste said, her voice not breaking but bending just slightly at the edges. 4 years ago. Said I was too controlled, too cold, that I didn't know how to let someone in. And then, last month, a mutual acquaintance told me that Vittoria had hired a photographer, a young, talented, observant photographer who spent a week at her estate. Her eyes lifted to mine, and the chill in them had turned into something else entirely, something wounded wearing armor. I wanted to know what Vittoria saw in you. There it was, the real commission. So this isn't a portrait session, I said, keeping my voice even. It's an audition. It's an interrogation. She stepped closer, and I didn't step back. I wanted to look at you. I wanted to understand what quality you possess that I apparently lack. What makes you worthy of Vittoria Ashford's attention when I wasn't? I should have been angry. I should have picked up my equipment and walked out and told her that my private history wasn't a subject for corporate revenge. I didn't. Because what I saw when I looked at Celeste Rourke in that moment wasn't cruelty. It was grief wearing a $5,000 blazer. It was a woman who had been told she was too cold to love and had spent 4 years building an empire just to prove she didn't need anyone. And now she was standing in that empire at 11 o'clock at night, holding photographs of the woman she still loved and asking me, the photographer, the observer, the one who notices what powerful women try to hide, to explain to her why she wasn't enough. You could have just asked her, I said quietly. Vittoria doesn't explain herself. She simply moves on. Celeste's jaw tightened. I thought if I brought you here, if I could see you, photograph you the way you photograph others, I could find the answer myself. I could prove to myself that you weren't special, that you were just convenient, young, a novelty. And the word hung between us. Celeste's eyes flickered. For the first time since I'd walked in, her composure slipped just a hair, just for a heartbeat, and I saw something behind the ice. Confusion, hunger, fear. And, she said, her voice dropping to something almost private, you're not what I expected. The city lights refracted through the glass walls, painting her in silver and shadow. The portfolio of old photographs sat open on the desk like a wound that hadn't healed. Somewhere in the building, a ventilation system hummed a low note that felt like the room's heartbeat. What did you expect? I asked. Someone easy to dismiss. She was close enough now that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the ones her expensive creams couldn't erase. Evidence of a woman who had felt things deeply enough to leave marks. Instead, you walked in here, you realized what this was, and you didn't flinch. You didn't apologize. You looked at me like you were already developing a photograph of me in your mind. I was. She blinked. That's what I do, Miss Rourke. I look at people. I notice what they're hiding. I lifted my camera, not to shoot, just to hold it between us. And right now, you're hiding the fact that this isn't about Vittoria anymore, is it? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Celeste's lips parted. No sound came out. I set the camera down on the desk, next to the dead champagne and the photographs of a love she couldn't let go of. My hand was inches from hers. I didn't close the distance. I let her see that I wouldn't. You hired me to be a weapon, I said. Someone you could control and aim at the woman who hurt you. But I'm not a weapon. I'm not Vittoria's, and I'm not yours. I'm just the person who sees you. Her breath caught. Audible. Small. Human. The Ice Queen's first crack. I don't know what to do with that, she whispered. Neither do I. We stood there, the city at our feet, her past spread out on the desk, my camera waiting for a photograph that might never get taken. Then Celeste did something I didn't expect. She reached out, slowly, deliberately. Her fingertips brushed the back of my hand, barely a touch, barely a promise. And she didn't look away. Dahlia, she said, and it was the first time she'd used my name. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to understand that it has nothing to do with Vittoria. Ask. Come back tomorrow night. Her fingers pressed just slightly against my skin, and I felt the warmth beneath the cold. Not for the campaign, not for revenge, not for her. The pause stretched like a held note. For me. The elevator chimed softly in the hallway, waiting to take me back down to a world where CEOs were just clients, and photographers didn't get caught in the gravitational pull of the women they were paid to see. I looked at her hand on mine. I didn't pull away. The elevator chimed again, insistent. I didn't move toward it. Celeste's fingertips were still resting on the back of my hand. Not gripping, not claiming, just there. A question shaped like touch. Her skin was cooler than I'd expected. Not cold. Cool like the shady side of a stone wall on a hot day. Like something that had been sheltered from light for a long time. Tomorrow night, I repeated. Not quite a yes. Tomorrow night. Her voice had lost its corporate edge. What remained was thinner, more uncertain. I'll have the campaign setup taken down. No pretense. Just... She paused, and I watched her search for a word that her boardroom vocabulary didn't contain. Whatever this is. Celeste. Her name in my mouth made her blink. You don't know what this is. No, she admitted. The admission seemed to cost her. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, then deliberately released. I planned for everything tonight except you being you. I had a script, a sequence. First the reveal about Vittoria, then the power play, then watching you crumble or get defensive or prove yourself exactly the way I'd assumed you would. Her fingers withdrew from my hand, and the absence felt louder than the touch had. You didn't. Sorry to ruin your revenge. Something flickered across her face. Not a smile. She still hadn't given me a real one, but the muscle memory of one. Are you? The question sat between us, and I realized I didn't have an answer I trusted. So I did what I always did when I didn't trust my words. I reached for my camera. May I? May you what? Photograph you. Now, before I leave. Celeste's posture shifted, shoulders back, chin lifting, the armor clicking back into place almost reflexively. The campaign lighting isn't... I don't care about the campaign. I lifted the camera to my eye, adjusting the focus ring with a familiarity that felt like breathing. I want the woman I just saw. The one who admitted she didn't have a script. Dahlia, trust me for 30 seconds. The viewfinder framed her face. The city light caught the silver threads in her hair, the tension in her temple, the way her lips had parted slightly and forgotten to close. She wasn't looking at the lens. She was looking at me through the lens, which was a different thing entirely. Click. The shutter sound was soft, mechanical, honest. "There," I said, lowering the camera. "Now I have something to look at tonight." Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A door opening, maybe, or at least unlocking. "You're very sure I'll be on your mind." "I'm very sure you already are." The elevator ride down took 47 seconds. I counted. I counted because counting kept me from replaying the sensation of her fingertips on my skin, from unpacking the way she'd said, "for me," like she was testing whether the words still fit in her mouth, from wondering what Vittoria would think if she knew her former lover and her recent photographer had just spent 43 minutes in a glass room above the city, orbiting each other. Vittoria. The name surfaced like a splinter I'd forgotten was there. 4 months ago, I'd stood in her Provencal library at 2 a.m, and she'd traced the edge of my collarbone with one elegant finger and said, "You see people too clearly, Dahlia. It's a gift. It's also a curse. You'll fall in love with everyone you photograph, and none of them will know what to do with being seen." I'd laughed then, told her she was being dramatic. But Vittoria Ashford was never dramatic. She was simply old enough and experienced enough to recognize patterns before the people living them did. The elevator deposited me into the marble lobby. My footsteps echoed off surfaces designed to intimidate. The security guard at the front desk, a young woman with buzzed hair and a neck tattoo, glanced up from her phone. "Miss Voss?" I paused. "Yes?" "Miss Rourke's office called down. She's arranged a car for you." The guard gestured toward the revolving doors. "Black sedan. Curbs waiting." Of course she had. The car was sleek and silent and smelled like leather that had never known a wrinkle. The driver didn't speak. The city slid past the tinted windows, a blur of neon and shadow, and I caught my reflection in the glass. Same dark hair, pulled back in a low knot that had loosened over the course of the night. Same lean face, sharp jaw, eyes that Vittoria had once called uncannily steady. I looked like someone who had walked into a trap and hadn't sprung it. Someone who had been hired as a weapon and had refused to be wielded. I looked like myself. But my hand was still warm where Celeste had touched it. I pressed my palm flat against the cool window and let the city's chill seep in. My apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in a building that had been built before elevators were standard. Exposed brick. A fire escape that doubled as a balcony. Prints of my work taped to the walls because I hated frames. Frames felt like coffins for photographs, and I preferred my images to feel alive. I set my equipment case by the door, kicked off my boots, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass that still had yesterday's lipstick on the rim. Then I sat on my second-hand sofa, pulled out my camera, and scrolled backward through the digital captures. The campaign setup Celeste's team had built. The pearl gray backdrop. The champagne flute on the desk. I'd shot that before she'd arrived. A habit of documenting empty spaces before people filled them. And then her. The frame I'd taken just before leaving. Celeste Rourke in her charcoal suit, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a jewelry box behind her. Her expression wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was something in between that I didn't have a word for. Unfinished, maybe. Like a sentence that had been cut off mid-thought. I zoomed in on her eyes. The gray was lighter near the pupil, almost silver. And around the edges, faint but unmistakable, the redness of someone who had been fighting back tears and winning. "I don't know what to do with that," she'd whispered. Neither did I. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. Did you look at it yet? The photograph? I stared at the screen. She'd gotten my number. Of course she'd gotten my number. She'd had her team research my portfolio specifications without my knowledge, had learned about Vittoria and me through whatever network of whispers powerful women use to keep track of each other. A phone number was nothing. I typed, "I'm looking at it now." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. And you're not what I expected either, I wrote. The pause that followed was long enough that I finished my whiskey. Then, what did you expect? Her own question returned to me. I set the phone down, looked at the photograph again, at the woman I'd been hired to be a weapon against, at the grief she wore like a second skin, at the hand that had touched mine with the hesitance of someone who had forgotten how to reach out. I picked the phone back up. "Someone easier to dismiss," I typed. The 3 dots appeared, lingered, vanished. No response. I poured another whiskey and waited. The city hummed outside my window. Somewhere, far below, a siren wailed and faded. The radiator clanked its old bones rhythm. Still nothing. I was halfway through the glass when the phone buzzed once more. "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. The private elevator access code is 4217. Don't bring your camera." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. A dozen replies crowded my thoughts. Deflections, questions, the professional instinct to re-establish boundaries that had already dissolved. Instead, I typed, "What should I bring?" The reply came faster this time. "Just yourself. I want to know if that's enough." I read the message 3 times. The 4th time, I noticed my hand had drifted to the back of my own wrist, where her fingertips had rested. The spot was no longer warm, but I could still feel the shape of her touch, pressed into my skin like an afterimage. 8 o'clock, I thought. 8 o'clock was 16 hours away. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, finished my whiskey, looked at the photograph one more time before shutting off the camera. Tomorrow night, I would walk into a glass tower above the city and sit across from a woman who had tried to use me as ammunition and found herself disarmed instead. We would not talk about Vittoria. We would not talk about revenge. We would talk about whatever 2 people talked about when they'd both been seen too clearly to hide. And I would not bring my camera. That, more than anything else, was what scared me. The apartment felt smaller at 7:47 p.m. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, the one with the crack running diagonally across the corner from when I'd moved in 3 years ago and dropped a lamp, and studied myself the way I'd study a subject before a shoot. Dark hair down tonight, not pulled back in the professional knot Celeste had seen yesterday. A silk blouse the color of red wine, unbuttoned at the collar. Black trousers. No camera strap cutting across my shoulder, and the absence felt phantom. My hand kept drifting up to adjust equipment that wasn't there. "Just yourself," I muttered at my reflection. Great. Fantastic. What the hell does that even mean? My reflection didn't answer. It just stared back with the same steady eyes Vittoria had called uncannily observant, and Celeste had called something else entirely, something she hadn't named yet. My phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Celeste. I canceled the campaign setup. I typed back, "What did you tell your team?" The reply took a moment. That the photographer needed a second session. Creative differences. That's almost true. Almost is the best kind of truth. I smiled. Actually smiled. The kind of smile that happens before you've decided whether it's appropriate, before your brain catches up to your face. Then I caught myself smiling in the mirror and the strangeness of it, smiling at a text from a woman who had tried to destroy me 24 hours ago. made me set the phone down and step back from my own reflection. The private elevator access was tucked behind the main lobby, past a door marked Authorized Personnel Only, that swung open when I entered the code 4217. It was 7:58 p.m. I was 2 minutes early, and I was terrified. Not of Celeste, not exactly. Of the fact that I'd left my camera at home. Of the fact that I'd spent 16 hours thinking about the way her voice had cracked when she said, "For me." Of the fact that Vittoria's voice was in my head. "You'll fall in love with everyone you photograph." And I hadn't photographed Celeste since last night, but I was still thinking about her. The elevator was the same one I'd ridden down yesterday. Mirrored walls, subdued lighting, the kind of design that forced you to look at yourself. So I did. My blouse had shifted during the walk from the car. I adjusted it, smoothed my hair, wondered if Celeste would notice that I'd worn it down. The elevator slowed, stopped. The doors parted with that same held breath sound from yesterday, and the top floor office opened before me. The campaign setup was gone. No pearl gray backdrop, no softbox lights arranged in careful arcs. The glass office had been stripped back to its bones. Just the desk, the window, the city beyond it, and Celeste Rourke standing in the center of the room like she'd been waiting there since I'd left. She wasn't wearing charcoal tonight. Instead, a silk blouse the color of champagne, tailored black trousers, and her silver hair looser, not down, but less severe, a few strands escaping to frame her cheekbones. She'd foregone the blazer entirely. Her arms were bare, and I noticed for the first time that she had a scar on her left forearm. Thin, pale, old. "You came," she said. "You asked." I stepped out of the elevator. It closed behind me with a soft exhale. "The campaign wall. I told you. No pretense." She gestured around the empty office. "This is the room as it actually is, when there's no one to impress." It's emptier than I expected. So am I. The words sat in the air between us, and I didn't know what to do with them. Compliment her honesty? Disagree? Agree and watch her flinch? I settled for walking toward the window, my heels clicking against the polished floor, until I stood where she'd stood last night, back to the door, city at my feet. "You're in my spot," Celeste said, and there was something almost playful in it. Not quite, but almost. "Your spot has a good view. I paid for it. Every window in this building represents a negotiation I won. That must be exhausting." She didn't answer. Instead, her reflection appeared in the glass beside mine. Taller, paler, her champagne blouse catching the city light like liquid gold. She'd come to stand next to me without making a sound. "You're not wearing your camera," she said. "You told me not to bring it. I didn't think you'd listen. I didn't think I would either." Her reflection's eyes met mine in the glass. That gray, that winter sea gray. And around the edges, the same faint redness from yesterday. She'd been crying again, or still. "Why did you?" she asked. "Because you asked me to bring myself instead." I turned from the window and faced her. Real her, not reflection her. And the nearness of her made my throat tight. And I wanted to know if that was enough. Is it? I don't know yet. My hand twitched at my side, the old habit of reaching for a camera that wasn't there. I've been photographing people for 12 years. I've built a career on capturing what they're hiding. Without the lens, I'm not sure what I have to offer. Celeste's gaze dropped to my empty hands. "You have yourself. That's what I asked for." "And you?" I asked. "What do you have tonight?" No campaign, no revenge script, no Vittoria to aim me at. Her jaw tightened, then released. It was becoming a familiar rhythm, that tension and deliberate release, like she was teaching her body to unlearn years of armor. "I have questions," she said. "Things I wanted to ask you last night that I didn't because the script still mattered to me. Because I was still pretending this was about control. And now I'm not pretending." She walked to her desk where the leather portfolio of old photographs still sat, closed now. Her fingers rested on its worn edge. "May I ask you something personal? You've already seen my client list and figured out my private history with your ex. I think we're past formalities." That almost smile flickered again. "When you photographed Vittoria in Provence, when it became not professional, who initiated it?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Again, like last night, but deeper. "She did," I said. "But I didn't stop her." "Did you want to?" "No." "Why not?" "Because she's Vittoria Ashford." I paused. "And because she looked at me the way you looked at me last night, like I was the first person in a long time who actually saw her." Celeste's fingers curled against the portfolio, not gripping, just holding on. "She used to look at me that way." "I know. How do you—" She stopped, shook her head. "The photographs, the ones in this portfolio. You saw them yesterday." "I saw them. I also saw what you looked like in them. You weren't a CEO in those photographs, Celeste. You were just a woman in love. A woman who wasn't enough." Her voice splintered on the last word, and she turned away from me, toward the window, toward the city that she'd bought and built and conquered, because conquering was easier than grieving. I have spent 4 years telling myself that Vittoria was wrong about me, that I wasn't cold, that I was simply efficient, controlled, strong. But then I hired you to destroy you, and you walked in here and you saw me in 30 seconds. 30 seconds, Dahlia. And I realized Vittoria was right. I don't know how to let someone in. I crossed the room, not quickly, not slowly, at the pace of someone approaching a wounded animal who might flee or might fight. "And yet," I said, stopping beside her, "you just let me in." Her breath caught, that audible, small, human sound from last night. "How do you do that?" she whispered. "Do what?" "Make confessions feel less like surrender." "I don't make them feel like anything. I just listen." She turned to face me. The window was at our backs now, the city a constellation of cold light behind us. Her eyes were wet, not crying, not quite, but the gray had turned to mercury, liquid and bright. "You scare me," she said. "Why?" "Because I planned for everything except you. Yesterday, you said you planned for everything except me being me. Today, I'm saying I planned for everything except you. Period. No qualifier. Just you." Her hand lifted, slowly, the way it had last night. Her fingertips hovered an inch from my jaw, and I could feel the warmth of them before they touched me. The absence of touch as a kind of presence. "May I?" she asked. "You asked yesterday, too." Yesterday, I was still pretending. And now? Now I'm asking because I want to. Not because I'm trying to prove something. Not because you're Vittoria's. Because you're you. And you came here without your camera. And I... Her voice broke, and she didn't finish the sentence. "Yes," I said. "Whatever you were going to ask, yes." Her fingertips touched my jaw. The contact was light, barely there. Her skin was cooler than mine, and the contrast made me aware of my own temperature, my own pulse, the blood moving under the surface she was barely grazing. She traced upward, along my jawline, toward my cheekbone. Her touch so faint it felt like a question more than an action. "Your skin is warm," she said, wonderingly, as if she'd forgotten that people were warm. "Yours is cold." "I know." I lifted my own hand, let it hover beside her face, the way hers hovered beside mine. "May I?" She didn't answer with words. She leaned her cheek toward my palm, and the gesture was so unexpected, so un-Celeste, that I almost pulled back. I didn't. My palm made contact with her cheekbone. The sharp architecture of it. The faint lines at the corner of her eye, deeper than I'd noticed yesterday, evidence of years spent frowning at spreadsheets and hiding heartbreak. Her skin was cool, but underneath the coolness was a warmth she was keeping buried. Like the earth in early spring, frozen on the surface, alive underneath. "You're trembling," I said. "I'm aware." "When was the last time someone touched you? Before yesterday?" Her eyes closed. Her cheek pressed harder into my palm. 4 years. "Celeste, don't pity me." Her voice was sharp again, but the sharpness was desperate, not cruel. "I didn't tell you so you'd feel sorry for me. I told you so you'd understand why this, why you, why I can't seem to control myself around you." I stepped closer. Our faces were inches apart now. Her champagne silk and my wine silk. Her cool skin and my warm skin. Her breath, which had quickened, and my breath, which had gone very, very still. "I'm not pitying you," I said. "I'm looking at you. And what do you see? Someone who's been alone for 4 years because she's terrified of being seen. And I see her anyway." Her eyes opened. Gray on gray. City light and tears, and the reflection of my own face in her pupils. Her hand slid from my jaw to the back of my neck, and the pressure was still light, still asking, still giving me room to step back if I wanted to. I didn't step back. "Dahlia," she breathed, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to want someone without trying to control them." "Then stop trying." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Her hand tightened at my nape, just slightly, just enough that I felt the shift from asking to needing. "Kiss me," she said. "Not because I'm commanding it, because I'm asking. Because I want to know what it feels like to be kissed by someone who sees me and doesn't run." The city held its breath outside the glass. The elevator stayed silent. The portfolio of old photographs sat closed on the desk, and somewhere in its pages was a younger Celeste looking at Vittoria, like Vittoria was the sun. But I wasn't Vittoria, and Celeste wasn't looking at me the way she'd once looked at the sun. She was looking at me like I was the first warm thing she'd felt in 4 years. I leaned in. The kiss was softer than I expected. That was what ruined me first. Not the hunger, not the danger, not the fact that Celeste Rourke's hand was still at the back of my neck, and the city was watching us through 40 floors of glass. The softness. Her mouth met mine like she had prepared for impact and found warmth instead. For one suspended second, she did not move. She simply received the kiss, still and stunned beneath it, as if her body had forgotten that tenderness could arrive without asking for collateral. Then she breathed. It was such a small thing. A breath against my mouth. A surrender so quiet, no board member, no rival, no ghost from Vittoria's past would ever have believed it. Her fingers tightened at my neck. Not hard, not commanding. Just enough to tell me she was still there. Just enough to tell me she wanted me to stay. I kissed her again, slower this time, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. She stepped closer instead, one hand sliding from my jaw to my shoulder, then stopping there, as if she had reached the edge of a country she was not sure she had permission to enter. I smiled against her mouth. "You can touch me, Celeste. Her eyes opened. The gray in them had gone soft and terrible. "I know," she whispered. "That is the problem." "No." I brushed my thumb along the edge of her cheekbone. "The problem is that you keep treating desire like it has to become control." That landed. I felt it in the stillness of her body, in the way her hand softened at my shoulder, in the way she looked at me, not wounded this time, but listening. "You are not a tool for revenge," she said. "No. You are not Vittoria's. No." Her throat moved. "And you are not mine." I held her gaze. "Not unless I choose to be close." For a moment, neither of us moved. The office around us seemed too large for the two of us, too expensive, too clean. The glass desk, the silent elevator, the closed portfolio with Vittoria's old photographs inside. The city below, glittering like it had never broken anyone's heart. Celeste stepped away first. Just one step. Enough to make my body notice. Enough to make me miss her before she had fully left. She turned toward the desk and looked at the leather portfolio. "I kept those photographs because I thought they proved something," she said. "What?" "That I had once been wanted." The confession came out flat, almost clinical. That made it hurt more. I did not answer immediately. I watched her fingers hover over the portfolio, not touching it. Her hand was steady now, but I knew better. I had seen the tremor. I had photographed the crack. "You were loved," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Not well enough to stay." "Maybe not," I said. "But that does not mean you were impossible to love." She laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was unbearable. "You say things like that very casually." "No, I say them carefully." It was full of doors. Celeste crossed back to me slowly. No performance now. No Ice Queen walk. No deliberate display of power. Just a woman approaching another woman with all her armor still visible, and all of it useless. She stopped close enough for her silk blouse to brush mine. Champagne and wine, cold and warm, revenge and whatever came after it. "I want to kiss you again," she said. "Then ask." Her mouth trembled. "Only once." "May I kiss you again, Dahlia?" Yes. This kiss was different. The first had been a question. This one was an answer. Celeste kissed me like a woman learning a language she had once been fluent in and then forbidden herself to speak. Careful at first, then deeper. Her hand slid to my waist and stopped there, asking. I stepped closer, answering. The city blurred behind her. Vittoria's name did not vanish from the room. It remained there, somewhere behind us, inside a closed portfolio on a glass desk. But it was not between us anymore. That mattered. When we broke apart, Celeste rested her forehead against mine. Her breathing was uneven. So was mine. "You should go," she whispered. I gave a breathless laugh. That is not usually what a woman says after kissing someone like that. "I know." Her eyes remained closed. "That is why I am saying it." I pulled back enough to see her face. "Celeste, if you stay tonight," she said, opening her eyes, "I will want too much too quickly. And I need one honest thing with you before I ruin it by trying to control the pace." The honesty of that hit harder than the kiss. Maybe because it was harder for her. Maybe because for the first time, Celeste Rourke was not using restraint as a wall. She was using it as care. I touched her wrist. "The fact that you know that means you are already doing better than you think." She looked down at my fingers on her skin, then back up. "Come back tomorrow." I almost smiled. "You like tomorrow?" "I like surviving tonight." That did make me smile. Her mouth softened at the sight of it, and for a second I saw what she must have looked like years ago, before the empire, before the ice, before Vittoria leaving turned softness into something she considered a liability. "What happens tomorrow?" I asked. No campaign, no portfolio, no Vittoria. No camera? She considered me. Then, very carefully, she said, "Bring it if you need to feel safe. Leave it if you want to be brave." That was the cruelest thing she had said all night. Not because it was unkind, because it was true. The elevator chimed behind me. This time, neither of us pretended not to hear it. Celeste walked me to the doors, not touching me, close enough that I felt every inch of restraint like a hand on my skin. When the elevator opened, I stepped inside and turned around. She stood in the doorway of her glass kingdom, champagne silk wrinkled at the collar, silver hair loosened, eyes still wet, mouth still marked by mine. She looked less powerful than she had yesterday. She looked more dangerous. "Dahlia," she said. "Yes, I did not hire you because of your camera. I know." Her hand rested lightly on the elevator frame. "I hired you because I wanted to know what Vittoria saw in you." And the doors began to close. Celeste's smile was small, devastating. "Now I am afraid I understand." The doors sealed between us. My reflection appeared in the mirrored wall, hair loose, lips still warm, silk blouse slightly disturbed, eyes not nearly as steady as I wanted them to be. I had walked into Celeste Rourke's tower as a photographer, then as a weapon, then as a question. I left as none of those things. The elevator descended through 40 floors of glass and steel, carrying me back toward the city, toward my apartment, toward the camera waiting unused on my table. Tomorrow, I could bring it. Tomorrow, I could leave it behind. Either way, I knew the truth now. Celeste Rourke had stopped trying to get revenge on Vittoria. She had done something much more dangerous. She had started wanting me for herself.